Get out. I never want to see your face in this mansion again. You are monsters, not children. The scream from Mrs. Gummidge echoed through the marble hallways of my Santon estate, followed by the shattering of a priceless Ming vase. I stood in the foyer, my heart sinking into my designer loafers. This was the 12th nanny in 4 months. 12 women, all highly recommended, all reduced to tears by 2 7-year-olds. Before we dive into this heart-wrenching journey of a father's desperation and a family's healing, welcome to the Royal Griot. We are so grateful for your incredible support as we bring you stories of our land, our people, and the strength of the African spirit. Please take a moment to drop a comment below and let us know where you are watching from. Whether you are in the vibrant streets of Lagos, the beautiful hills of Jamaica, or anywhere across the United States, we see you and we appreciate you. Now let us begin. I am Thabo Molefe. In the boardrooms of Johannesburg, they call me the Lion of Gauteng. I built a telecommunications empire from nothing but a borrowed laptop and a relentless hunger. I own a fleet of German cars, a private jet that sits ready at Lanseria Airport, and a fortune that could feed small nations. But as I stood in my living room looking at the flower-covered face of Mrs. Gummidge, I felt like the poorest man in South Africa. Mr. Molefe, I cannot do it. Mrs. Gummidge sobbed, her traditional head wrap lopsided. They didn't just put glue on my chair, sir. They told me that their mother is coming back to take them, and that I am just a placeholder who deserves to be punished. Those children are not just naughty, they are broken. She didn't wait for her final paycheck. She grabbed her bag and ran toward the gate, leaving the scent of expensive perfume and cheap flour hanging in the air. I turned my gaze toward the grand staircase. There they stood, Junior and Lindiwe, my twins, my flesh and blood. They looked like angels, Junior in his private school blazer and Lindiwe with her beautiful braids, but their eyes were cold, harder than the diamonds I'd bought their mother before she betrayed us and vanished to Europe with a French billionaire 3 years ago. Are you happy now? I shouted, my voice booming against the high ceilings. That was the last agency in the city. No one will come here. Do you want to live in a house with no one to care for you while I am at the office? Junior smirked, a chilling imitation of my own boardroom expression. We don't need anyone, Papa. We have each other. And besides, if they aren't Mama, they don't belong in her house. This is my house. I roared. And your mother is never coming back. Lindiwe's lip quivered for a second, but she masked it quickly with a sneer. Then we will keep breaking them until you stop bringing them. They turned in perfect synchronization and marched to their rooms, slamming the heavy mahogany doors. I sank into my leather sofa, burying my face in my hands. The billionaire lion was being defeated by 2 second graders. My empire was growing, but my home was a battlefield. The next morning I was at my desk by 5 a.m., staring at the Johannesburg skyline. The sun was beginning to hit the glass towers, but I felt no warmth. I had a merger to finalize, a R1 billion deal that would cement my legacy, but all I could think about was the empty chair at the breakfast table. My assistant, Lerato, walked in with a stack of files. She saw my face and sighed. Mrs. Gummidge called the agency, Thabo. The word is out. No professional nanny in South Africa will touch the Molefe twins. They're calling them the little dictators. I'll pay double, I muttered. Triple. Get someone from overseas if you have to. Money isn't the issue, Thabo, Lerato said gently. They don't need a professional with a degree. They need something else. My grandmother knows a girl from her village in the north. She just arrived in the city looking for work to pay for her sister's medical bills. She has no fancy certificates, just a heart of gold and the patience of a saint. A village girl? I scoffed. Lerato, my children are sophisticated. They speak 3 languages. They've traveled the world. What is a girl from the province going to do? She survived the drought of 2022, Thabo. She can survive your twins. I had no choice. Fine. Tell her to come this afternoon. If she lasts until dinner, I'll hire her. At 2 p.m., a modest taxi pulled up to my gates. I watched through the security cameras as a young woman stepped out. She wasn't wearing a uniform. She wore a simple, brightly colored African print dress that swayed in the breeze. She carried a small cardboard suitcase and held her head high. Her name was Amara. When she entered the foyer, I didn't see the fear I usually saw in the eyes of new staff. She looked at the marble floors, the gold-leafed mirrors, and the expensive art as if they were nothing more than rocks and dust. Mr. Molefe, she said, her voice soft but firm. Her English was clear with a beautiful, melodic lilt. I am here to help your children. You are here to manage them, Amara? I corrected her, checking my watch. I have a board meeting in 30 minutes. There is a list of rules on the fridge. Junior is allergic to peanuts. Lindiwe hates the color green. Do not let them near the pool without supervision, and for heaven's sake, keep them away from the kitchen flour. Amara smiled. It was a small, knowing smile. I don't need a list of rules, sir. I only need to see their hearts. I almost laughed. Their hearts? Good luck finding them. They're in their rooms, probably plotting how to make you cry by sunset. I grabbed my briefcase and headed for the limousine, leaving this fair maid to her fate. I expected a phone call within the hour. I expected to come home to another woman sobbing at the gates. Instead, when my driver pulled back into the driveway at 7 p.m., the house was silent. Eerily silent. I burst through the front doors expecting the worst. Amara? Junior? Lindiwe? I followed a faint sound coming from the garden. I stepped out onto the patio and stopped dead in my tracks. The twins weren't in their rooms. They weren't fighting. They were sitting on the grass, on the expensive manicured Kikuyu grass, covered in streaks of mud. Amara was sitting between them, her dress ruined, her hands busy weaving long blades of grass into the shape of a bird. But that wasn't the shock. The shock was the sound. Lindiwe was laughing. A real high-pitched childish giggle I hadn't heard in years. And Junior, my stoic angry son, was leaning his head against Amara's shoulder, watching her hands with wide wonder-filled eyes. And then, Amara whispered, her voice carrying on the evening breeze, the king of the birds told the little boy that true strength doesn't come from being loud. It comes from being still enough to hear the wind. I stood in the shadows, my heart pounding. How had she done it? How had this girl from the village tamed the monsters that a dozen professionals couldn't handle? Then Junior looked up and saw me. The warmth vanished from his face instantly. He stood up, wiping the mud onto his shorts. Papa, he said coldly. You're late. Again. Amara stood up gracefully, brushing the dirt from her dress. She looked at me and for a moment the billionaire lion felt completely transparent. They are good children, Mr. Molefe, she said quietly. They were just lonely. But we have a problem. What problem? I asked, reaching for my wallet, thinking she was about to ask for a bonus for her success. She looked toward the front gate, where a black SUV with tinted windows had just pulled up. My heart turned to ice. I recognized that car. Your past has arrived at the gate, Amara said, her eyes narrowing. And she doesn't look like she's here to play with grass birds. The car door opened and out stepped my ex-wife, Brenda, draped in furs and holding a legal document. She looked at the mud-covered children and the village girl, a cruel smile spreading across her face. Thabo, Brenda called out, her voice like a whip. I see the house has gone to the dogs. It's a good thing I've come to take what's mine. You're losing them, Thabo. Today. I looked at the twins. They had gone pale, clinging to Amara's skirts as if she were a shield. The battle for my family hadn't ended, it had only just begun. Don't you dare take another step toward my children, Brenda. My voice was a low growl, the kind I used when I was about to dismantle a competitor in the boardroom. I moved instinctively, placing myself between the woman who had abandoned us and the two terrified souls clutching Amara's muddy dress. Brenda laughed, a cold, brittle sound that set my teeth on edge. She looked like she had stepped off a runway in Paris, dressed in a cream-colored silk suit, her hair perfectly coiffed, her skin glowing from the finest European treatments. She looked every bit the billionaire's wife she had become, but to me she looked like a ghost come to haunt the living. Your children, Thabo? She sneered, clicking her designer heels across my patio. Look at them. They look like street urchins. Look at this girl you've hired to raise them. Is this what the Molefe fortune buys these days? A peasant from the bush to teach my children how to play in the dirt. Amara didn't flinch. She didn't look down. Instead, she tightened her grip on Lindiwe's hand. The dirt is where things grow, madam, Amara said softly. It is better than a heart of stone where nothing can live. Brenda's eyes flashed with a sudden, murderous rage. How dare you speak to me? Thabo, fire this creature immediately, or I will add hiring incompetent, disrespectful staff to my list of reasons why you are an unfit father. You have no list, Brenda, I snapped, my heart hammering against my ribs. You signed away your rights 3 years ago. You walked out of that mansion, got on a private jet and didn't look back once. Not on their birthdays. Not when Lindiwe was in the hospital with pneumonia. Not ever. Brenda reached into her leather handbag and pulled out a thick envelope. She tossed it onto the glass patio table with a heavy thud. The world has changed, Thabo. My husband, my real husband, has connections in The Hague and in the South African High Court. That envelope contains a summons. I am suing for full custody. I'm taking Junior and Lindiwe to London. I've already enrolled them in a boarding school in the countryside. Lindiwe let out a small choked sob. Junior's face went pale, his small hands curling into fists. We won't go, he shouted, his voice cracking. We hate you. You left us. Hush, darling, Brenda said, her voice dripping with fake honey. You're just confused because your father has turned you into a little savage. You'll love London. You'll have everything you ever wanted. They have everything they need right here, I said, stepping closer to her, my shadow falling over her expensive suit. They have a father who loves them. They have a home. And they have a legacy that you will never touch. A legacy? Brenda mocked. Thabo, your empire is built on a foundation of sand. I know about the merger. I know your board of directors is questioning your focus. They see a man who can't even control his own household. How can he control a multi-billion rand telecommunications giant? She leaned in, her perfume, the same one she wore the night she left, choking me. I'll see you in court on Monday morning. And Thabo? Clean them up. They look disgusting. With a final triumphant smirk, she turned and walked back to her SUV. We stood in silence, the only sound being the distant hum of Johannesburg traffic and the heavy breathing of two traumatized children. As the SUV pulled away, the tension snapped. Junior turned and ran into the house without a word. Lindiwe buried her face in Amara's side and began to wail. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated fear. I've got you, little bird, Amara whispered, picking the 7-year-old up as if she weighed nothing. I've got you. No one is taking you anywhere. I followed them inside, feeling like a stranger in my own home. I watched as Amara took Lindiwe to the bathroom. She didn't call for the housemaids. She didn't ask for help. She ran a warm bath, adding local oils that smelled of lavender and eucalyptus. She spoke to Lindiwe in a low, rhythmic tone, telling her a story about a lioness who had to go away, but how the mountain stayed behind to protect the cubs. I stood in the doorway watching the fair maid work her miracle. Amara's hands were gentle as she washed the mud from Lindiwe's arms. She didn't use the expensive French soaps Brenda had insisted on. She used a simple handmade bar she must have brought from her village. Amara, I said, my voice barely a whisper. She looked up, her dark eyes reflecting the soft light of the bathroom. She is scared, Mr. Molefe. They both are. They think they are pieces on a chessboard, being moved by people who don't care where they land. I do care, I said, feeling a pang of guilt. Everything I do, the boardroom battles, the fortune, it's all for them. Is it? Amara asked. It wasn't an insult, it was a genuine question. Because today is the first time I have seen you look at them instead of your watch. I felt the sting of her words because they were true. For 3 years, I had tried to outrun the pain of Brenda's betrayal by burying myself in work. I thought that by building a bigger empire, I could shield my children from the hole their mother had left in their lives. But I had only succeeded in becoming another ghost in the house. What do? I asked. The Lion of Gauteng was asking a village girl for advice. Be a father, not a billionaire, she said. Go to your son. He is in his room and he is not crying, which is worse. He is building a wall, and if you don't break it down tonight, you might never get inside again. I nodded, feeling a strange sense of respect for this woman. She had been in my house for less than 12 hours, yet she saw the truth of my family better than I did. I walked down the hall to Junior's room. I knocked softly. No answer. I pushed the door open. Junior was sitting on his bed, staring at a picture of our family from 4 years ago, the last one taken before Brenda left. He was holding a pair of scissors. Junior, stop. I lunged forward and took the scissors from his hand. He didn't fight me. He just looked at me with eyes that were too old for a 7-year-old. She's going to win, isn't she? She always wins. She said you're failing, Papa. She said the big bosses at your office don't like you anymore. I sat on the edge of the bed, the weight of the world on my shoulders. Junior, listen to me. I am the lion. Do you remember what I told you? A lion protects his pride. I don't care about the board of directors. I don't care about the money. I will fight her with everything I have. You are not going to London. But she has a lawyer, Junior whispered. And you're always at meetings. No more meetings, I promised, and in that moment I meant it. From now on, I am here. I stayed with him until he fell asleep, a restless, fitful sleep. When I finally left his room, I found Amara in the kitchen. She had cleaned up the mess from the afternoon and was making a pot of tea. You should rest, Amara, I said, leaning against the marble counter. It has been a long day. I'll have the driver take you to a hotel or... Wait, you're staying here, of course. I will stay in the staff quarters, sir, she said. No, I said, thinking of Brenda's sneer. You will stay in the guest wing. You are not just staff anymore. You are the only person my children trust. I need you to help me. Help you with what, Mr. Molefe? The court case. Brenda is going to use everything she can against me. She'll use the fact that I'm never home. She'll use the fact that the kids have gone through 12 nannies. I need you to be the proof that they are happy. That they are cared for. Amara set the teapot down. I will not lie for you, sir. If they are not happy, I will say so. I'm not asking you to lie, I said, stepping closer. I'm asking you to help me make them happy. Teach me what you did today. How did you make Lindiwe smile? Amara looked at me for a long time. The kitchen was quiet, the moonlight streaming through the large windows. For the first time, I noticed how beautiful she was, not the manufactured beauty of Brenda, but a natural, radiant grace. I didn't do anything special, she said. I just listened. Children don't care about your fortune, Mr. Molefe. They care about your time. I told them stories of our ancestors, of people who had nothing but held on to each other. I reminded them that they are not alone. I want to hear those stories, I said softly. The next few days were a whirlwind. I canceled my meetings. I stayed home. I sat on the floor and played with blocks. I watched Amara teach the twins how to plant a small vegetable garden in the backyard. I saw the little dictators transform into children again. But the shadow of Monday morning loomed over us. On Sunday night, I was in my study going over the legal documents with my lawyer, Sifo. He looked grim. It's not good, Thabo, Sifo said, rubbing his temples. Brenda's legal team is playing dirty. They've dug up records of every nanny who quit. They have statements from Mrs. Gauteng saying the house is unstable. And Brenda, she's playing the part of the reformed mother perfectly. She's claiming she left because of your emotional abuse, and that she's finally strong enough to rescue her children. That's a lie. I shouted, slamming my fist on the desk. She left for a man and a paycheck. We know that, but she has the paperwork. And Thabo, there's something else. She's filed an emergency injunction. She wants to take them to London tomorrow after the hearing, pending the final trial. If the judge grants it, they'll be on a plane before you can even say goodbye. My heart felt like it was being squeezed by a giant hand. I couldn't lose them. Not now. Not when I was finally learning how to be their father. I walked out to the balcony, looking over the sprawling lights of Johannesburg. The city looked so cold, so indifferent to my pain. Mr. Molefe? I turned to see Amara standing in the doorway. She looked troubled. What is it, Amara? I was cleaning the guest room where Madame Brenda stayed briefly to freshen up the other day, she said, holding out a small, crumpled piece of paper. She dropped this near the wastebasket. I don't think she meant for anyone to see it. I took the paper. It was a receipt from a private medical clinic in Switzerland. My eyes scanned the text and my blood ran cold. It wasn't for Brenda. It was a bill for a discreet placement and ongoing maintenance for a facility specializing in. I didn't finish the sentence. I looked at Amara, horror dawning on me. She's not taking them to a boarding school in London, is she? I whispered. I don't think so, sir, Amara said, her voice trembling. I think she's selling them. Her new husband. His business is failing. This isn't about love, Mr. Molefe. It's about the trust fund your father left for the twins. She needs the children to access the money, and once she has it, she'll discard them. I finished, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. Suddenly the front gates buzzed. I looked at the security monitor. It was Brenda's SUV again, but this time there was a police car behind it. Thabo Molefe, a voice boomed over the intercom. We have an emergency court order for the immediate removal of Junior and Lindiwe Molefe. Open the gates. I looked at Amara. I looked at the stairs where my children were sleeping, unaware that their mother had come to steal their future. Amara, take them, I said, my voice shaking with urgency. Take my keys. Go through the back servant's entrance to the garage. Take the SUV, the one without the GPS tracker. Go to your village. Don't stop for anyone. Sir, that's kidnapping. Amara gasped. No, I said, looking her in the eye. It's a second chance. I will stay here and face them. I will buy you time. Go. Now. As the police began to hammer on my front door, I watched the woman I had only known for a few days gather my children in her arms and disappear into the darkness. The lion was about to go to war. Where are they, Thabo? If you've hidden them, I'll make sure you rot in a cell for the rest of your miserable life. Brenda's scream ripped through the silence of the foyer as the front door was forced open. Two police officers stepped inside, their faces grim, followed by Brenda, who looked like a predator sensing a kill. She didn't look like a mother looking for her children. She looked like an investor looking for her stolen assets. I stood at the base of the grand staircase, my arms crossed, my heart hammering a rhythm of pure terror against my ribs. Behind me the house felt cavernous and empty. For the first time the silence of my mansion didn't feel like peace, it felt like a shield. Amara Jr. and Lindiwe were gone. They had slipped out through the servants' gate and into the labyrinth of Johannesburg's nighttime traffic just minutes before the sirens reached my driveway. "Officers, what is the meaning of this?" I asked, my voice steady despite the adrenaline. I used my boardroom voice, the one that had secured a billion-rand empire and silenced the most aggressive shareholders. "We have a court order, Mr. Molefe," the lead officer said, holding up a laminated document. "An emergency order for the protection of minors. Mrs. Brenda Molefe has provided evidence that the children are in an unstable environment and at risk of neglect. We are here to escort them to her custody." Neglect. I laughed, though there was no humor in it. "Look around you. My children have the best of everything. They are upstairs, sleeping. You are disturbing their peace based on the lies of a woman who hasn't seen them in 3 years. Liars always talk about peace, Thabo," Brenda spat, pushing past the officers. She began to run up the stairs, her designer heels clicking like gunfire on the marble. "Junior. Lindiwe. Mommy's here." I didn't stop her. I knew that every second she spent searching an empty room was another kilometer Amara gained toward the safety of the north. The officers followed her and I followed them, my mind racing. I was a billionaire, a man of immense power, but in this moment I was a man playing a dangerous game of chess with the law. I had sent my children away with a woman I barely knew, a mysterious stranger who had appeared in my life just when everything was falling apart. Was I crazy? Or was Amara the miracle I had been praying for? A blood-curdling shriek erupted from the nursery. I reached the doorway just as Brenda was overturning the beds, throwing the designer pillows and hand-woven blankets onto the floor. "Where are they? Thabo, where are they?" The officers looked at the empty beds, then at me. Their expressions shifted from professional detachment to deep suspicion. "Mr. Molefe," the lead officer said, his hand moving toward his holster. "Where are the children?" "I sent them to a safe location," I said calmly. "After the scene Brenda made earlier today, they were traumatized. I am their father, their legal guardian until a court says otherwise. I have the right to ensure their emotional well-being." "You have a court order against you," Brenda screamed, her face contorting, the mask of the elegant socialite slipping to reveal the monster beneath. "He's kidnapped them. Officer, arrest him. He's stolen my children." "I didn't steal them, Brenda. I protected them from you," I said, looking her straight in the eye. "You don't want them. You want the trust fund. You want the fortune my father built for his grandchildren because your new life in Europe is a lie. Your husband is broke, isn't he? That's why you're here." The silence that followed was deafening. Brenda's eyes widened, and for a split second, I saw the truth flash there: fear. I had struck a nerve. The Lion of Gauteng had found the weakness in the hunter's armor. "That's enough," the officer said. "Mr. Molefe, you are coming with us to the station for questioning. And you," he turned to Brenda, "will have to wait for the legal process. If he has moved the children in violation of a court order, he will be charged." As they led me out of my own home in handcuffs, I saw my neighbors peeking through their curtains. The Molefe scandal would be on the front pages by morning. My private jet would be grounded by the authorities. My limousine would sit idle. My boardroom would be in an uproar. But as the police car pulled out of the gates, I looked at the dark horizon and whispered a silent prayer. "Run, Amara. Don't look back." The holding cell at the police station was cold and smelled of floor cleaner and old sweat. I sat on the hard bench, my expensive suit jacket draped over my knees. I had been there for 6 hours. My lawyer, Sifo, had been working the phones, but Brenda's connections were deeper than we had anticipated. She had painted me as a man who had lost his mind, a father who had spiraled into paranoia. "Thabo," Sifo said, appearing at the bars of the cell. He looked exhausted. "I've managed to get you out on bail, but there's a condition. You are under house arrest. You cannot leave Johannesburg. And if you don't reveal the location of the children by noon tomorrow, the judge will issue a warrant for your permanent arrest for kidnapping." "I can't tell them, Sifo," I whispered. "If she finds them, she'll take them to that clinic in Switzerland. I saw the papers. She's going to dump them in a facility so she can control their inheritance." Sifo sighed, leaning his head against the bars. "I believe you, Thabo. But the law needs proof. And right now, the only proof we have is that you've disappeared 2 children into the night with a maid who has no formal employment record. I was released at dawn. The morning sun was a pale, sickly yellow over the Johannesburg skyline. When I arrived back at the mansion, the gates were surrounded by reporters. I ignored them, driving straight into the garage. The house felt like a tomb. I walked into the kitchen and saw the half-finished pot of tea Amara had made the night before. I touched the cold ceramic, feeling a wave of grief. I had everything: the fortune, the empire, the name, but I was a man who had been betrayed by the woman I once loved and was now separated from the children who were my only reason for living. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. I answered it instantly. "Hello." "It is me," a soft voice said. "Amara." My heart leaped. "Are you safe? Where are you?" "We are past Pretoria," she said, her voice muffled by the sound of wind. "The children are sleeping in the back." Lindiwe had a nightmare, but I sang to her. "Junior, he is holding the grass bird I made him. He hasn't let it go." "Amara, listen to me," I said, my voice shaking. "The police are looking for you. Brenda is desperate. You need to get off the main roads. Go to your village. Do you have enough money?" "I have enough, sir. But Mr. Molefe, Junior told me something. He said his mother told him that you never wanted them. That you only wanted an heir for your empire. He asked me if it was true." I leaned against the kitchen counter, tears stinging my eyes. "What did you tell him?" "I told him that a man who builds a kingdom doesn't do it for himself. He does it so his children can have a mountain to stand on. I told him you were a lion and that right now you were fighting the fire so they wouldn't get burned." "Thank you, Amara," I choked out. I don't know why you are doing this for us. You barely know me." "I know what it is to be abandoned, Mr. Molefe," she said quietly. "I know what it is to be struggling and have no one hear your cry. My sister is sick because we didn't have the money for a doctor. I will not let these children lose their soul because of money. This is our destiny, I think. To save each other." We hung up, and for the first time in 3 years I felt a flicker of hope. This wasn't just about a court case anymore. It was about a second chance. It was about healing a family that had been broken by greed and coldness. But the low of the journey was just beginning. An hour later, my front door opened. It wasn't the police. It was my board of directors. 4 men and 3 women, the architects of my fortune, walked into my living room. They didn't look like friends. They looked like vultures. "Thabo," the chairman, Mr. Sibanda, said, "the stocks have dropped 15% since the news broke this morning. The kidnapping billionaire is not a good look for our international partners." "My children are not a look, Sibanda," I said, standing tall. "They are my life." "Be that as it may," a woman named Cecilia added, "we have a morality clause in your contract. If you are charged with a felony, the board has the right to strip you of your chairmanship. We are here to offer you a deal. Hand over the children to their mother, issue a public apology, and step down for 6 months while this family matter is resolved. If you don't, we will vote to remove you permanently by the end of the business day." I looked at them, these people I had made rich. They didn't care about Junior's laugh or Lindiwe's nightmares. They cared about the numbers on a screen. "You want my empire?" I asked, a cold smile touching my lips. "Take it. If the price of my children's safety is my seat at the head of this table, then consider me retired." Their faces went pale. They hadn't expected me to walk away. They thought the money was my god just as it was theirs. "You're making a mistake, Thabo," Sibanda warned. "Without this company, you are just a man with a target on his back and no lawyers to protect you." "I have something better than lawyers, Sibanda," I said, walking them to the door. "I have the truth." After I kicked them out, I went to my study and opened a hidden safe. I didn't pull out cash. I pulled out a small digital recorder I had kept from the final months of my marriage, the nights Brenda thought I was asleep while she was on the phone with her associates. I had never used it because I wanted to protect the children from the truth of who their mother was. I wanted them to have a memory of a mother, even if it was a lie. But the time for protection was over. It was time for justice. Just as I was about to call Sifo, my phone rang again. It was Amara, but this time her voice was full of panic. "Mr. Molefe, someone is following us. A silver car, it's been behind us for 50 kilometers. Every time I turn, it turns. I tried to speed up, but they are right there." "Amara, stay calm. Where are you?" "We are near the Waterberg Mountains. It's getting dark. Oh no. They're pulling alongside. They're trying to ram us off the road." I heard the sound of screeching tires and a child scream, "Lindiwe. Amara. Amara." I shouted into the phone. The line went dead. I stood in the center of my silent mansion, the digital recorder in my hand, my fortune useless, my empire crumbling, and my children's lives hanging by a thread in the dark heart of the bush. The lion had lost his cubs. And the hunter was closing in. The silence that followed the disconnection was louder than the roar of any engine. I stood in my silent study, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the hollow hum of a dead line. My children. My brave, beautiful children were out there in the dark, being hunted like prey in the very land I claimed to rule. I looked at my hands. They were the hands of a billionaire, hands that signed million-dollar contracts and shook the hands of presidents. But right now, they were shaking with a terror I hadn't felt since I was a young boy struggling in the townships. I was the lion of Gauteng, but I had left my cubs in the care of a mysterious stranger, and now the fire was consuming them. I didn't think about the house arrest. I didn't think about the police watching the front gates or the board of directors waiting to strip me of my empire. I grabbed my keys and the digital recorder. If I stayed here, I was a prisoner of my own fortune. If I left, I was a man fighting for his soul. I didn't take the limousine. I went to the back of the garage where an old, rugged 4x4 sat covered in dust, a relic from my younger days when I used to scout tower locations in the deep bush. I bypassed the main gate, driving through the narrow service path that led to the back of the estate. The tires crunched over the gravel, a sound of rebellion. As I sped onto the highway toward the Waterberg Mountains, the city lights of Johannesburg began to fade in the rearview mirror. The sprawling mansion and the golden towers of Sandton were replaced by the jagged silhouettes of the acacia trees and the vast, unforgiving African sky. I was driving into the heart of the low point of my life, a place where money meant nothing and blood meant everything. My mind raced. Brenda wouldn't do the ramming herself. She was too refined, too careful of her own skin. She had hired someone, mercenaries who didn't care about children, only about the payout. I felt a surge of cold-hearted rage, the kind that had made me a legend in the boardroom. But beneath it was a soft-hearted father who just wanted to hear his daughters giggle one more time. 2 hours later I found the site. The moonlight was bright enough to reveal the carnage. My black SUV was tilted into a ditch, its side crushed and windows shattered. There were no police. There were no lights. Just the smell of burnt rubber and the sound of crickets. I leaped out of my car, my heart in my throat. Amara. Jr. Lindiwe. I ran to the wrecked SUV. It was empty. There was no blood on the seats, thank God, but the interior was a mess. I looked down at the floor mat and saw it, the little grass bird Amara had woven. It was crushed, its wings bent into the dirt. Please, I whispered, falling to my knees in the red dust. Please let them be okay. I began to track the footprints. I wasn't an expert hunter, but the red earth of the north told a story. I could see the heavy prints of men's boots, 2, maybe 3, and the light, frantic prints of a woman and 2 small children. They were heading into the thick brush toward the mountains. Amara was leading them away from the road, into the territory she knew better than any city-bred thug. I followed the trail for miles. The thorns tore at my expensive shirt, and the heat of the day lingered in the rocks, but I didn't feel it. I was a man possessed. I realized then that for years, I had been abandoned by my own ambition. I had betrayed my children by giving them toys instead of time, and now, a woman who had nothing was giving her life to save them. Suddenly I heard a sound. A low whistle like the call of a nightjar. I froze. From behind a massive baobab tree, a figure emerged. It wasn't a gunman. It was a tall, elderly man in traditional Venda attire, his face a map of 1,000 stories. "You are the father?" he said. It wasn't a question. "Where are they?" I gasped, my lungs burning. "The girl from the village is clever," the old man said, pointing toward a hidden cave high up in the krantz. "She led the jackals on a chase through the thorn bushes while she hid the small ones in the place of the ancestors. But the jackals have found the scent. They are circling back. I have to get to them," I said, reaching for my wallet. "I'll give you anything. Just help me." The old man looked at the thick stack of bills in my hand and shook his head slowly. "Your paper has no power here, lion. But your courage does. The jackals have guns. You have only your hands and your heart. Is that enough?" "It has to be," I said, my voice cracking. He led me through a narrow pass, moving with a ghost-like silence I couldn't hope to match. As we climbed, I saw the flicker of a flashlight in the distance. Brenda's men. They were closing in on the cave. "Junior, stay behind me," I heard a voice whisper. It was Amara. She sounded exhausted, her voice raspy from the dry air, but there was an iron strength in it. "Lindiwe, do not make a sound. The mountain is our mother. She will hide us." "We know you're in there, sister," a man's voice shouted, echoing off the rocks. "Just give us the kids and we'll let you walk away. The lady just wants her property back." "They are not property," Amara screamed back, her voice ringing with a fierce, protective love. "They are children of the soil and you will not touch them." I saw the men then, 3 of them dressed in tactical gear, looking completely out of place in the wild. One of them raised a rifle toward the entrance of the cave. My blood turned to ice. I didn't think about the consequences. I didn't think about the healing I needed or the miracle I was looking for. I just acted. I picked up a heavy, jagged stone and hurled it toward the man with the rifle. It caught him on the shoulder, knocking his aim wide. The shot went off, the roar deafening in the narrow canyon, but it hit the rock face. "Hey!" I roared, stepping out into the moonlight, my silhouette large against the sky. "You want a prize? Come and get the lion." The men turned, surprised by my presence. In their hesitation, Amara acted. She didn't run away. She threw a handful of dry sand and ash into the eyes of the closest man, a trick from the village that left him screaming and clawing at his face. "Papa!" Junior's voice cried out from the cave. The other 2 men recovered quickly. One lunged at me, his fist connecting with my jaw. I went down, the world spinning. I was a billionaire who hadn't been in a physical fight since primary school, and I was being pummeled in the dirt. But every time he hit me, I thought of Lindiwe's smile. Every time I felt the sting of a blow, I thought of the way Junior had looked at the grass bird. I fought back with a desperation that bypassed skill. I bit, I scratched, I kicked. I wasn't fighting for a seat in a boardroom, I was fighting for the right to be a father. Suddenly, a bright light flooded the canyon. "Saps! Drop your weapons. Hands in the air." The police? How had they found us? From the shadows, Sifo, my lawyer, stepped out alongside a high-ranking police captain. "I tracked your car's secondary emergency beacon, Thabo. And I brought the authorities who aren't on Brenda's payroll." The men were quickly tackled and handcuffed. The jackals were neutralized. I scrambled to my feet, my face bruised and bleeding, and ran to the cave. Amara emerged, holding Lindiwe, who was sobbing into her neck. Junior followed, his face streaked with dirt but his eyes shining with a new, fierce pride. "Papa," he whispered, running into my arms. "You came. You really came." I held them both so tight I thought I'd never let go. I looked at Amara, who was standing back, her dress torn, her hands scratched, her face weary beyond words. She looked at me and gave a small, tired nod. "They are safe, Mr. Molefe," she said. But the low wasn't over. As the police led the men away, the captain approached me, his face grim. "Mr. Molefe, we've arrested these men for attempted kidnapping and assault. But we also have a call from the Johannesburg branch. Your ex-wife, Brenda, has filed a report claiming you fled the city in violation of your house arrest and that you've endangered the children by bringing them into the bush. She's at the station now with a judge, signing the final papers to have you declared an unfit parent and a flight risk." "She's lying," I shouted. "It doesn't matter," the captain said. "The law is a machine, sir. Until we can prove her intent, she has the upper hand. You need to come with us. And the children, they have to be placed in state care until the hearing tomorrow morning." "No!" Lindiwe screamed, clutching my leg. "Don't let them take us." I looked at Amara. I looked at my children. The empire was gone, the mansion was a cage, and now the law was coming to finish what Brenda had started. We were all struggling now, caught in a web of lies and greed. "Wait," Amara said, her voice quiet but commanding. She reached into the pocket of her torn dress and pulled out a small silver object. It was a high-end digital voice recorder, the one I had given her for the children to listen to stories. "I didn't just tell them stories in the car," she said, looking at the police captain. "I kept it recording when the men rammed us. And I kept it recording when Madame Brenda called them on their radio to tell them not to worry if the children get a few bruises, as long as they are delivered to the clinic." The captain took the recorder. As the voices filled the night air, Brenda's cold, calculating voice talking about her children as if they were livestock, the silence returned to the canyon. But even as hope flickered, a new shadow appeared. A black SUV, not the police, pulled up to the road. Out stepped Brenda, but she wasn't alone. She was with a man in a dark suit, a man I recognized from the national government. "Thabo," Brenda said, her voice smooth as silk despite the evidence. "You really should have stayed in the city. You've made this so much easier for us." She looked at the police captain and smiled. "Captain, I believe you have my children. And I believe you have a warrant for Mr. Molefe's arrest for the theft of government-sensitive documents found in his home this evening." I stared at her in horror. She hadn't just come for the kids. She had planted evidence in my home to destroy me completely. She was playing a game far bigger than a custody battle. She was going for my life. The low had just hit rock bottom. The cold steel of the handcuffs biting into my wrists was nothing compared to the ice in Brenda's eyes. She stood there, flanked by Advocate Sithole, a man whose reputation for fixing problems for the elite was as famous as his collection of Italian silk ties. I looked at my children. Junior was trembling, his small chest heaving as he tried to be the man he thought I wanted him to be. Lindiwe was clinging to Amara's torn dress, her eyes wide with a terror no 7-year-old should ever know. This was the woman who had birthed them, yet she looked at them like she was checking the balance of a bank account. Chapter 5. You're a fool, Thabo, Brenda whispered, leaning in so close I could smell the expensive gin on her breath. You thought you could hide them in the bushes? You thought a village girl and a bit of red dust would save you from me? I am the wife of a man who owns half of Geneva. You are just a billionaire with a crumbling empire and a house full of secrets. I have no secrets from my children, Brenda, I said, my voice echoing in the mountain pass. But you are a walking lie. Advocate Sithole stepped forward, holding a tablet. Mr. Molefe, the warrant is clear. We found the classified telecommunications blueprints in your study, the ones that were reported missing from the Ministry of State Security last month. This isn't just a custody battle anymore. This is espionage. This is treason. I felt the world tilt. I had never seen those documents in my life. She had planted them during the chaos of the police raid at the mansion. It was a masterstroke of malice. She didn't just want the children. She wanted me in a maximum security prison so she could take over the Molefe fortune as the sole guardian of the heirs. Take them, Sithole commanded the officers. As the police moved toward Amara and the children, a sudden, piercing whistle broke the tension. It was the old Venda man. He hadn't moved from the shadows of the baobab tree, but now he stepped forward, his eyes fixed on Advocate Sithole. The mountain does not forget a thief, the old man said in a voice that sounded like grinding stones. Sithole scoffed. Get this beggar out of here. I am no beggar, Advocate, the old man replied, his gaze unwavering. But I remember you. 20 years ago, when you were a small-time lawyer stealing land from the widows in the north. You haven't changed. You still serve the highest bidder, even if they pay in blood. The advocate's face turned a sickly shade of gray, but he waved the police on. Move. Now. The next few hours were a blur of agony. I was shoved into the back of a police van. Amara was separated from us, taken in a different vehicle, while Brenda forced the screaming children into her SUV. The sound of Lindiwe calling for Papa and Amara, as the doors slammed shut, is a sound that will haunt me until the day I die. I was driven back to Johannesburg under heavy guard. I wasn't taken to the local station. I was taken to a high-security holding facility. My empire was in freefall. The news was reporting that the Lion of Gauteng had been caught in a plot to sell state secrets to foreign interests. My board of directors had already issued a statement distancing themselves from me. I was betrayed by everyone I had ever trusted, except for a village girl who was likely sitting in a cold cell herself. In the early hours of the morning, Sifo was finally allowed to see me. He looked like he had aged 10 years in a single night. Thabo, it's bad, he said, sitting across from me in the plexiglass interview room. The evidence is digital and physical. They found the files on your private server and the hard copies in your safe. Brenda's husband has been funneling money to Sithole's offshore accounts for months. They've built a cage you can't climb out of. What about the children? I asked, my voice a hollow rasp. They're at the mansion. Brenda has moved in. She's fired all the staff. She has guards at the gate. The court hearing is in 4 hours. The judge. Thabo, the judge is a close associate of Sithole. This isn't a trial, it's a funeral. I leaned my head against the cold wall. I had reached the absolute bottom. My fortune was frozen, my name was mud, and my children were in the hands of a woman who saw them as currency. Where is Amara? I asked. They released her, Sifo said, surprised. Since she had no criminal record and they couldn't prove she knew about the documents, they kicked her out of the station in the middle of the night. She's probably halfway back to her village by now. You can't blame her, Thabo. She's a struggling girl. She did more than anyone could expect. A wave of disappointment washed over me, though Sifo was right. Why would she stay? She had no stake in this war. She was just a mysterious stranger who had tried to do a good thing and got caught in a billionaire's nightmare. Sifo, I said, my eyes hardening. I need you to do one thing. Don't worry about the espionage charges. Don't worry about the board. Just get me to that courtroom. I don't care if I'm in shackles. I want to look my children in the eye before she takes them. At 10 a.m. the Gauteng High Court was a circus. Reporters from every major network were lined up outside. I was led through the side entrance, my hands and feet in chains, the orange jumpsuit a burning brand of shame against my skin. Inside the courtroom, Brenda sat at the front, looking radiant in black lace, playing the role of the grieving, concerned mother to perfection. Junior and Lindiwe sat beside her, looking like dolls, stiff, silent, and utterly broken. When Junior saw me, he tried to stand up, but Brenda gripped his arms so hard her knuckles turned white. The judge, a stern man with a heavy brow, banged his gavel. This is an emergency hearing regarding the custody of the Molefe minors and the freezing of the Molefe estate pending criminal proceedings. Advocate Sithole stood up, his voice smooth and oily. My lord, the evidence is overwhelming. Thabo Molefe is not only an unfit father who kidnapped his children and fled into the bush, but he is a threat to the security of this nation. We ask that full, permanent custody be granted to the mother, Brenda Molefe, and that she be granted administrative control over the children's trust funds to ensure their continued stability in London. The trust fund, I muttered. Always the money. Mr. Molefe, be silent, the judge barked. Does the defense have anything to offer? Any reason why I should not sign this order immediately? Sifo stood up, his voice shaking. My lord, we maintain that the evidence was planted. We maintain that Mr. Molefe was acting out of a well-founded fear for his children's safety. Fear? Sithole mocked. He took them into a cave. He fought the men we sent to rescue them. He is a violent man, my lord. I have something to say. The voice came from the back of the courtroom. It wasn't loud, but it had a frequency that cut through the legal jargon like a bell. Everyone turned. Standing at the doors was Amara. She wasn't wearing her torn dress. She was wearing a simple, clean suit that Lerato must have provided for her. Her hair was neatly braided, and she held a small, weathered leather bag. She looked neither like a servant nor a victim. She looked like a witness. Who are you? The judge demanded. I am the woman who saved those children from the fire, Amara said, walking down the center aisle. And I am the woman who has the truth. Brenda let out a sharp, panicked laugh. My lord, this is a domestic worker. She's a co-conspirator. She should be arrested, not heard. Let her speak, the judge said, his curiosity piqued by the absolute calm in Amara's eyes. Amara reached the front of the court. She didn't look at me. She looked directly at Brenda. Madam, you told the court that you want stability for your children. But you didn't tell them about the house in Zurich. You didn't tell them about the debt your husband owes to the Russian creditors, the debt that is exactly the same amount as the twins' trust fund. How do you know that? Sithole hissed, his face pale. Because I am not just a girl from the village, Amara said softly. She reached into her bag and pulled out a stack of documents. I am a sister who lost her family to men like you. And I have spent the last 3 years working for the National Prosecuting Authority as an undercover investigator, looking into the fixers of Santon. A collective gasp rippled through the room. My jaw dropped. The mysterious stranger Lerato had found wasn't a coincidence. She was a hunter who had been looking for a way into Brenda's circle for months, and I had handed her the keys to the kingdom. My lord, Amara continued, handing the documents to the court clerk. These are the bank statements from Switzerland, obtained via an international warrant. They show the transfer of funds from Advocate Sithole to the very men who attacked us in the mountains. And this. She held up the digital recorder, is the full, unedited conversation between Brenda Molefe and her husband, discussing the accidental death of Thabo Molefe once the children were safely in London. Brenda screamed, a raw, ugly sound, and tried to lung across the table at Amara. The bailiffs caught her, but the mask was gone. The billionaire lioness was a cornered animal. The judge's face went from stern to horrified as he glanced at the documents. He looked at Sithole, who was already inching toward the exit. Officers, secure this courtroom. No one leaves. I looked at Amara. She finally turned to me, a small, sad smile on her lips. I told you, Mr. Molefe. The mountain does not forget. But as the police moved to arrest Brenda and Sithole, a new terror erupted. Brenda, in a fit of manic rage, broke free for a second and grabbed Lindiwe, pulling a small, sharp letter opener from the judge's desk. If I don't get the money, no one gets them, she shrieked, the blade pressed against the child's throat. The courtroom froze. The billionaire was in chains, the law was in chaos, and my daughter's life was balanced on the edge of a mother's madness. This was the moment of destiny. This was the final test. Brenda, look at me. I shouted, my voice breaking the spell of the room. Look at your daughter. Look at her eyes. The final high was about to begin. The courtroom was frozen in a moment of pure, agonizing terror. The air seemed to have been sucked out of the room, leaving only the sound of Brenda's ragged, desperate breathing and the tiny choked whimpers coming from Lindiwe. My daughter, my little girl who had only just begun to learn how to smile again, was staring at me with eyes that begged for a miracle. I looked at Brenda. The woman I had once promised to protect, the woman I had shared a bed with, was now a stranger, a cold-hearted ghost of the person I thought I knew. The letter opener glinted under the harsh fluorescent lights of the Gauteng High Court. One slip, one sudden movement from the bailiffs and my world would end. "Brenda," I said, my voice low and steady, though every nerve in my body was screaming. "Look at me. Not at the judge, not at the cameras. Look at me." "Don't come any closer, Thabo," she shrieked, her eyes darting around like a trapped animal. "I'll do it. I have nothing left. You've taken my husband's fortune, you've ruined my name, you've put me in a cage. If I'm going down, I'm taking the only thing you love with me." "You haven't lost everything, Brenda," I said, taking a slow, cautious step forward, the chains of my handcuffs rattling softly. "You still have a choice. You can be the woman who walked away or you can be the woman who destroyed her own blood. One of those women can find forgiveness one day. The other will never know peace." "Forgiveness?" She laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "What does a billionaire know about forgiveness? You only know about winning." "I was winning when I was alone in that boardroom, Brenda. But I was losing my soul," I said, my heart breaking for the woman she used to be. "Amara taught me that. She showed me that a man who builds a kingdom but loses his children is just a king of ashes. Look at Lindiwe. She's not a trust fund. She's not a bargaining chip. She's your daughter. She has your eyes, Brenda. She has your laugh." For a second, just a heartbeat, I saw the blade tremble. The mention of the girl's eyes seemed to pierce through the fog of her madness. "She hates me," Brenda whispered, her voice cracking. "She doesn't hate you," Amara said, stepping forward beside me. Her voice was like oil on troubled water, calm, rhythmic, and filled with a strange, ancient authority. "She is just waiting for the mother she remembers. The one who sang to her before the world became about gold and silk. Brenda, the mountain is tall but the valley is where the water flows. Come down from the mountain. Let her go." Lindiwe looked up at her mother, a single tear tracking through the dust on her cheek. "Mama," she whispered. "Please. I'm scared." That one word, "Mama," did what no lawyer, no police officer, and no billionaire could do. It shattered the ice. Brenda's hand shook violently, and the letter opener clattered onto the polished wooden floor. She collapsed, her silk suit bunching around her as she began to sob, a raw, guttural sound of a woman who had finally realized she had reached the end of her lies. The bailiffs moved in instantly, but I was faster. Despite the chains, I lunged forward and scooped Lindiwe into my arms, pulling her away from the chaos. Junior ran to us, throwing his arms around my waist, and for the first time in years, the three of us were a unity that could not be broken. Justice was swift. Advocate Sithole was arrested on the spot, his dreams of a European retirement replaced by the reality of a South African prison cell. Brenda was led away in handcuffs, charged with attempted kidnapping, assault, and fraud. As she was taken through the side door, she didn't look back. She couldn't. The weight of her betrayal was a burden she would have to carry for a long time. 3 days later, I stood in the grand foyer of my Sandton mansion. The Lion of Gauteng had returned, but the lion had changed. The espionage charges had been dropped within 24 hours once the NPA verified Amara's evidence. My fortune was unfrozen, and my empire was mine again. But the first thing I did was call an emergency board meeting. I didn't go in a limousine. I drove myself in the old 4x4, the one still covered in the red dust of the north. I walked into the boardroom and looked at Mr. Sabanda and the others who had been so ready to throw me to the wolves. They were smiling now, offering their sincere congratulations on my unfortunate misunderstanding. "Save it," I said, tossing a stack of resignation papers onto the table. "I'm restructuring. Every one of you who voted to remove me while my children were missing is out. I don't want vultures in my house. I want people with hearts." "You can't do this, Thabo," Sabanda sputtered. The market will survive," I said, leaning over the table. "Because from now on, this company isn't just about telecommunications. We are launching a foundation for the children of the North, for the ones who are struggling like Amara's sister. We are going to build clinics and schools. Because a billionaire who doesn't give back is just a man with a lot of paper and no purpose." I walked out of that building and never felt lighter. When I got home, the mansion didn't feel like a museum anymore. There were toys on the floor. There was the smell of real food, not the tiny expensive portions my French chef used to make, but a hearty stew that Amara was teaching the kitchen staff to prepare. I found Amara in the garden sitting with the twins. She was packing her small cardboard suitcase. My heart constricted. "Amara? What are you doing?" I asked, walking across the grass. She stood up, her face radiant in the late afternoon sun. "My work here is done, Mr. Molefe. The NPA has assigned me to a new case in Cape Town. And besides, my sister's surgery is tomorrow. I need to be with her. I've already sent my private jet to fetch her," I said, stepping closer. "She's being moved to the best hospital in Johannesburg as we speak. I've paid for everything, the surgery, the recovery, and a house for your family here in the city." Amara shook her head, a soft smile on her lips. "You didn't have to do that, sir. I was just doing my job." "No," I said, taking her hand. "You were doing what no one else would. You were being a friend to a family that didn't know how to be one. You are the miracle we needed, Amara. And I don't want you to leave. Not as a nanny. Not as an investigator." The twins looked up, their eyes wide with hope. "Please stay, Amara," Lindiwe cried. "You haven't finished the story about the star child." Amara looked at the children, then back at me. I saw the mysterious stranger soften into something more. "And what capacity would I stay in, Mr. Molefe?" "As a partner," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "In the foundation. In this house. In our lives. I've spent my life looking for a fortune, but I found it in a girl who made my children smile when I couldn't." She didn't answer with words. She simply set her suitcase down and reached out, taking the grass bird Junior offered her. It was a new beginning. A second chance for a man who had everything and nothing, and a woman who had nothing and everything. Months later, we sat on the patio as the sun set over Johannesburg, the city lights beginning to twinkle like fallen stars. The mansion was full of music, real African jazz that echoed through the halls. Junior was reading a book, and Lindiwe was curled up in Amara's lap, listening to the evening breeze. I realized then that poetic justice isn't about seeing your enemies suffer. It's about seeing your family thrive. Brenda was gone, her greed her own prison, but we were free. We had found healing in the dirt, trust restored in the truth, and a love that won against all odds. I am Thabo Molefe. I am still a billionaire, but my true wealth isn't in my bank account. It's in the laughter of my children and the hand of the fair maid, who showed me the way home. Our destiny was written in the red dust, and finally the lion's pride was at peace. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more gripping stories like this. We believe that every family deserves a second chance and that love is the greatest empire of all. What do you think happens next for Thabo and Amara? Does Brenda ever seek true redemption? Comment below and let us know your thoughts. We love hearing from our global family. Thank you for watching The Royal Griot. Until next time, stay blessed.